Dumbarton Football Club, one of the 11 founding members of the Scottish Football League, plunged into administration in November of 2024. Not only were they a founding member, but they actually won the Scottish Football League in its inaugural season, joint top with Rangers on 29 points. Funnily enough, they now look set to do Rangers by liquidating and coming back from the grave, as a way of dealing with their current financial problems. Thankfully, there have been a number of Scottish clubs in the last few decades which haven't had to go down this route, who were in fact saved from extinction, sometimes with minutes to spare. I've got a list of 10, some more shocking than others, with a few honourable mentions. Stick around for the story behind number 10, you are not going to want to miss it. Starting with the most recent Scottish club to almost fall victim to the sword of liquidation, Inverness Thistle faced a severe financial crisis in 2024. The club reported losses of £1.2 million from the 2023-24 season. The crisis reached its boiling point in early October when interim chairman Panos Thomas announced the club needed to raise £200,000 within 2 weeks to avoid administration. Despite attempts at crowdfunding and seeking new investment, the club failed to meet the necessary target. On October 22nd, 2024, Inverness officially entered administration and received a 15-point deduction, leaving them on -3 points at the bottom of League One. The financial problems were partly caused by failed development projects, such as a proposed battery farm that could have generated the club an apparent £3.4 million. To add to this, the club were stuck with a ludicrous 4-year kit deal with Puma, where Inverness themselves were having to pay the kit manufacturer over £100,000 per season. What the f*** are they playing at? The crisis resulted in significant personnel changes around the club, with then manager Duncan Ferguson departing followed administration, which Inverness fans were delighted with. The club also managed to overturn their points deficit at the bottom of the table and finish an impressive 7th place. Not only that, but on the 5th of June they officially announced that there are plans in place to exit administration, hopefully before the start of the next season. I'm sure Callum will be absolutely delighted with that news. In 1994, Celtic were on the brink of financial collapse, with debts sitting at over £7 million. The club had been badly mismanaged for years, and despite being one of the most successful teams in Scottish football, performances in the park had taken a big hit. In fact, the Glasgow Giants had failed to finish in the top 2 since 1988, when they won the league. Numerous third place finishes plagued the club throughout the 80s and 90s, which led to a big drop off in attendances. A record low 4,956 people watched the Hibs play against Dundee in April of 1984, a far cry from the high 50,000s of current times. The turning point in Celtic's destiny came when the Bank of Scotland, the club's main creditor, demanded repayment of an overdraft, threatening to call in the receivers. The intervention of Scottish-Canadian businessman Fergus McCann saved the club from imminent disaster. McCann, who had developed a keen interest in Celtic over the years, took the bold step of purchasing them for £9.5 million, and the deal was concluded a supposed 8 minutes before the club would have been declared bankrupt. One of Fergus's first acts was to redevelop Celtic Park, which at the time looked like a bit of a dump. The redevelopment lasted from 1994 to 1998, with the club playing their home games at Hampden for the first of those 4 years. In the years that followed, Celtic began to re-establish themselves as a giant of the Scottish game, putting a stop to Rangers 10 in a row in 1998, before also falling at the last hurdle on the race to the record-breaking feat in 2021. To be fair, there wasn't even a race that season. Rangers won the league by a whopping 25 points. Next we have Queen's Park, Scotland's oldest football club, who found themselves in the middle of a financial storm at the turn of the 21st century. The club had historically been run on a tight budget, but the shoestring was reaching breaking point after the decision to redevelop Hampden, which the club owned, into a state-of-the-art stadium for bigger fixtures, such as the 2002 Champions League final. The project was expected to be a financial hit, but it quickly turned into a financial disaster. In 2000, it was revealed that Queen's Park had been running large deficits. After some back and forth discussions, the SFA swooped in to save the day, taking control of Hampden off of Queen's Park to help bring them out of administration. The deal involved the SFA paying the club £800,000 a year for 20 years, £600,000 of which was to be wired straight to the debtors' pockets annually. In 2019, the SFA bought Hampden outright for a total of £5 million, with lesser Hampden being built alongside it to house Queen's Park. This move has been a bit of a mess though, with the club continuing to play at Hampden in the seasons that followed. No wonder, have you seen the capacity of that shithole? Barely even enough seats to accommodate a boys' club. Next we have Greenock Morton, who also experienced severe financial stress around the turn of the millennium. The club's issues began to surface in 2000, when it became clear that Morton were struggling with a significant debt. One of the debts was actually to another Scottish club, Hearts, over the signing of forward Kevin Thomas. The SFA even threatened to banish the club from the association if the appropriate fee wasn't paid. At the time, Morton were in the Scottish First Division, the second tier of Scottish football, but their financial troubles were becoming a major concern. The debt was mostly the result of poor financial management and awful attendances. As a result of their financial woes, Morton faced back-to-back relegations, finding themselves languishing in the bottom tier of Scottish football. They were ultimately saved by new chairman Douglas Ray, who invested heavily to diminish the debts, and in the years that followed, the club were able to climb back to the second tier of Scottish football, where they currently remain. Back to the Scottish Premiership, and next we have Motherwell. Aye, she's alright, thanks. In 2002, Motherwell found themselves in severe financial trouble, around £2 to £3 million per year, and growing. The club's financial troubles were partly caused by an inflated wage bill, representing a massive 97% of their annual earnings. Players like Andy Gorham, Roberto Martinez, Ged Brannan, and the club record signing John Spencer were all signed on lucrative contracts. Local millionaire and then owner of the club, John Boyle, firstly blamed departing chief executive Pat Chiefenevin for the downfall, as he was awarding extended contracts to guys who were underachievers. But John later changed his stance, instead blaming the collapsed Sky TV deal in 2002. The supposed deal was hinted at being as much as £150 million over 4 years, a massive £30 million more than it is today. Well done, Neil Doncaster. However, that number ended up being massively inflated, with Sky instead offering a measly £11.5 million a year, which Scottish clubs voted against. Eventually, BBC came in at the last second and won the rights, for a derisory £8 million a year. No wonder clubs fell like dominoes after that, for f***'s sake man. English clubs get more than that in 48 hours nowadays. Thankfully, Motherwell emerged from administration in 2004, but their experience became a harsh reality for others going forward. The first of which was Dundee, who in 2003 were also struck by the hammer of administration. The club's debt had reached a staggering £20 million, largely due to reckless spending during the late 90s and early 2000s. The club had been living beyond its means, and when results on the pitch failed to match the ambitious financial outlay, shit hit the fan. The club underwent an overhaul of its operations. Craig Burley and Fabrizio Ravanelli, who were only signed months prior, were the first out the door. Gavin Ray and Natch Novo soon followed, both joining Rangers in 2004. With point deductions for administration being introduced in the summer of that year, Dundee had to get a move on. Thankfully for them, they announced plans to exit administration before the May 31st deadline, and avoided any deductions. But that wasn't the case in 2010 when they were again under financial trauma. And this time, as a result of entering administration, were hit with a 25-point deduction by the Scottish Football League. This penalty left Dundee 20 points adrift at the bottom of the First Division. However, after an unbelievable 23-game unbeaten run, they managed to defy the odds and stay up. The feat was made even more poetic in that the manager at the time, Barry Smith, was club captain back in 2003 when the first administration hit. Survival in the second division wasn't the only thing to celebrate that summer, as the club officially exited administration for a second time in May of 2011. Fan group D for Life were a massive factor in saving Dundee from both periods of turmoil, and went on to become the club's majority shareholder until 2013. Following Dundee, we have another club who were hit by administration twice, Livingston. No wonder, they've got no fans. Livingston FC, a club that had experienced a rapid rise in the Scottish football pyramid following their name change from Meadowbank Thistle, 3 titles in 6 years to be exact, faced a financial crisis that threatened to undo all the progress they'd made. Livingston's then chairman, Dominic Keane, found himself unable to maintain the club's high spending habits, which got them from the 4th tier to the Premiership, leading to him resigning. While attendances increased at first when the club got promoted to the Prem, they dropped off after the initial buzz, and the income versus expenditure just wasn't adding up. The timing of the administration couldn't be worse though, coming less than 24 hours after a Scottish League Cup semi-final win, over Dundee funnily enough. Shockingly, Livingston went on to win the Cup, beating Hibs in the final 1 month later. They also managed to escape the SPL's incoming points deduction rule by starting their exit from administration on the 28th of May 2004. The celebrations didn't last too long however, when in 2009 Livingston entered administration again, for a second time. Like in 2004, the financial mismanagement from previous years caught up with the club. It was found that Livingston were in around £1 million of debt, with £330,000 of that owed to West Lothian Council for their use of the spaghetti hats. However, in possibly the quickest exit from administration ever seen in Scottish football, Livy were bought a mere 19 days later. The Scottish Football League hit the club where it hurts so, demoting them to the 4th tier for the upcoming season. Unsurprisingly, with a club full of second tier players, Livingston romped to the title, winning the league by 15 points. They followed that up with an even more conclusive league title in the 3rd tier the next season, winning that division by 23 points. Dunfermline were the next club to fall on the sword in 2013. The problems began at the start of the 2012-13 season, as the club were relegated from the Scottish Prem to the 2nd tier the previous campaign. The relegation triggered a dramatic drop in revenue. The mounting debt, which had been steadily increasing for years, got too hot to handle in March of 2013, and the club placed itself in voluntary administration. As a result, Dunfermline were given a staggering 15 points deduction, which led to a second relegation in 2 seasons, dropping them down to the 3rd tier of Scottish football. Then manager Jim Jeffries was outraged at this decision, leading to a bust-up with Scottish Football League chief David Longmuir. Ultimately, Dunfermline emerged from administration later that year, with fans group Pars United taking over. Hearts made it 2 in a year when they were hit by the hammer themselves in June of 2013. The club's financial problems were largely attributed to poor management under the ownership of Lithuanian businessman Vladimir Romanov. Romanov had invested heavily in the club, but also incurred significant debts. The situation came to fruition during the 2012-13 season, when the club failed to pay its players on numerous occasions. This led to a number of different transfer embargoes, stopping them from buying any more players. When the club failed to pay player wages again at the end of the season, that's when things all came crashing down. After finishing in 10th place, they would now have to start the 2013-14 campaign on minus 15 points, something that they failed to recover from, resulting in relegation to the Scottish Championship. Despite this, Hearts continued to fight on and managed to avoid liquidation by finding new ownership through a fan group, the Foundation of Hearts, fronted by Anne Budge. The transition to fan ownership was a monumental shift for the club, and the Budgie transferred her stake to the supporters in 2021, making Hearts the largest fan-owned club in the UK. Before we get to number 10, I'll share some honourable mentions that aren't quite exciting enough to warrant their own spot in a video, but still deserve a word. Number 1, St Johnstone, 1986. Number 2, St Mirren, 1990s. Number 3, Partick Thistle, 1997. Number 4, Raith Rovers, 2005. Number 5, Edinburgh City, 2023. Last but not least, we have Hibs, who although never actually entered administration, found themselves in an even worse situation in 1990 when the possibility emerged of a potential merger with city rivals Hearts. At the time, the club was burdened with considerable debts. Hibs' debts were estimated to be around £4.5 million in total, which was substantial for a club of their size. That was when, on the 4th of June 1990, seemingly out of the blue, then Hearts chairman Wallace Mercer walked into a room and announced a plan to take over neighbours Hibernian, forming a merger in an attempt to break the old firm dominance in Scottish football. The idea of a merger between Hibs and Hearts, however, was met with significant opposition from both sets of supporters, Hibs fans especially, as they feared that this could spell the end for their club. Up stepped former director Kenny McLean, who took charge of a supporters action group called Hands Off Hibs, and set up a rally in an attempt to show Mercer that Hibs weren't backing down without a fight. The event was attended by famous faces in the world of Hibernian Football Club, such as former players Joe Baker and Pat Stanton, alongside celebrity fans The Proclaimers. A stunning rendition of You'll Never Walk Alone ran out around Easter Road, an atmosphere only bettered by Hibs fans singing Sunshine on Leith, following their Scottish Cup success 26 years later. Mercer eventually backed down on the 14th of July 1990, and Sir Tom Farmer stepped in to save the club from administration. It was the hands-off Hibs movement, however, which showed that the fans are the most important part of a football club. As we've seen with a number of different Scottish clubs throughout this video, without the backing of the fans, the clubs would simply cease to exist. In the summer of 1990, Hibs fans didn't only save their club, they saved Scottish football. That's it for this video. Thanks to anyone that made it this far. If you enjoyed, feel free to drop a like and leave a comment, maybe even subscribe. Click here to continue watching more of my content. Thank you.